Good afternoon and welcome to the Children's Scrutiny panel for Kirklees Council on Wednesday the 28th of July starting at 2:15 p.m. in the afternoon. Really welcome to everybody who's watching this online or watching this at an archive in the future. Just telling people that actually the business this afternoon will be recorded for archive purposes if people want to access that in the future. I just want to introduce a few members of the panel. I'm Andrew Marchington, one of the councillors for the Goker Ward, and I chair the panel. Linda?
Good afternoon, my name's Linda Summers. I'm a co-optee on the panel.
Jackie?
Good afternoon, I'm Jackie Ramsey. I'm a councillor at Dewsbury South and just joined the panel more recently.
Thank you, Jackie. Elizabeth?
Same with me, a recent member of the panel, councillor for Goker Ward as well.
Lovely. Paul?
Paul White, councillor for Home Valley North and Kirklees, panel member.
And Dale?
Dale O'Neill, Vantage Co-optee.
Thank you, Dale. And I've received apologies from Joshua Sheard. Richard Smith, who's another panel member, who's having technical difficulties at the moment due to the storms we've got.
I'm here, Andrew.
Oh, he's here. Right. You just want to introduce yourself, Richard?
Yeah, Richard Smith, councillor Kirkburton Ward and panel member. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. And Tony Bromley, who's another co-optee to the panel, is not feeling particularly well this afternoon, so our thoughts are with Tony. Okay. Right, item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. Have we got any corrections or clarifications on that? Dale?
Yes, on the page 4, where it says resolved, I would like a clarification made, please. On number 2, it says it refers to a family of 4 where there were 2 workers and 2 children. What was actually asked for was a narrative which explained how and when a family of 2 parents working on minimum wage with 2 school-aged children will be able to access help when they needed it. And the response at the time, and I quote, was, "That is a good idea." So could that resolve be altered, please?
Yeah. Is that all right, Helen, if we just put that on the minutes? And just to say, as part of our work programme, and it fits in with what the cabinet priorities that we've been received as well, we're going to be looking at family hubs, and particularly what we wanted to focus on from a scrutiny point of view is actually looking at how parents can engage with the family hubs and how effective that is. So if we can, yeah, that's a particular scenario where we can look at how easy working family manages to do that in particular circumstances, but there might be other families who want to talk to as well. So thank you, Dale. Okay, any other clarifications on the minutes? Fine, thank you. So can we approve those as amended as a correct record of that meeting? Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Brilliant. Right, item 3 is declaration of interest. Have any members of the panel got a declaration of interest on any of the items? I'm not seeing that. That's fine. Thank you. This is a virtual meeting, but it is a meeting in public. Everything that all the items on the agenda this afternoon will be discussed online. And but if there's any item that we feel needs to be discussed confidentially, we'll move the appropriate resolutions for that. Okay. Helen, have we received any deputations or petitions?
No deputations or petitions received, Chair.
Thank you. And have we had a request from any members of the public to ask a question this afternoon?
No questions, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Right, we're on to item 7 then, which is the standing item for the panel this afternoon, and it's looking at the number and age of children in care. So who's leading on this item this afternoon? Elaine? Ophelia, sorry. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name's Ophelia Ricks. I'm the head of corporate parenting, so that's that I oversee the work around children looked after and care leavers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to just discuss some key highlights in terms of the report. And then what I'll do then is I'll come over to your panel then to ask any questions that you sort of need to ask, and hopefully I'll be able to respond. So what I'll do then is I'll just go through in relation to the number of children looked after, and I know it's highlighted, and as you can see from the report, there's been a decline in the numbers of children that I've looked after since January 2021. And from my perspective and the work that's been undertaken, there's quite a number of services now in place to oversee and ensure that children can remain at home within their families. So we've done quite a lot of work to look at. So if we do look at the breakdown of the information, there are a high number of children who have been successfully living with their connected families, or so families, grandparents, aunts. So that's resulted in some of the numbers of their children no longer becoming looked after. I'm not sure if you've seen the special guardianship order. There's a policy now in place that supports in terms of any financial support, and we have a connected or a family and friends support service, so that we can actually look at children being within their families. So that's one of the services and our financial offers to connected families that's had a positive impact, where children who were previously deemed as being looked after because they were subject to care orders have now their orders have been discharged, so they're now subject to special guardianship orders, so that means that they can remain within their families. We also have a robust, so we have a legal gateway, and a permanence panel that looks at the early permanence planning for our children and young people. And again, we've been able to successfully for children to actually remain within the family, and because again our ethos and principles is to ensure that children remain within their communities and they remain within their family networks. And again, from my perspective, it's ensuring that children are safe. So it means that we're not saying that children are not becoming looked after in relation to when it's safe for them to be in care. So so, and then some of the other work that we've done is looking at our multi-systemic work. So that means that we've been doing some wraparound with some of our families. So again, what I'll do is I'll be able to, again, you can ask some questions around that. So I know from sort of the information, I know there are some concerns around the decline, but I feel that we have a really good, robust process. We're clear in terms of our early planning. We've got some really clear services around our early family support planning, a family group conferencing, which has been really helpful in terms of working and ensuring that family members are around. So I think that's some of the work that we've done in relation to our ongoing numbers of children looked after. Just in terms of the number of children who are actually placed outside of the Kirklees district, we have currently 72 children who are actually placed outside of the district. So, and within that, we have 50 children, young people who are placed within a foster carer setting. And we have 22 of our children, young people who are placed within a residential setting. So you've seen a decline in the number of children who are placed outside of Kirklees district, and we continue to review and have a monitoring of our children, young people in the work that we need to bring them back into the district. You'll see from the information that we have the highest number of our children, young people who are looked after are aged 10 to 15 and of white British, and then we have 121 girls aged 10 to 15 who are looked after. And then we've seen a slight increase in children, young people, dual heritage, but highest percentage of children who are looked after of white British. So that's, I think they're sort of the key headlines for me in relation to the work. We're continuing to work with families, to continue to have, and that we're working with the wider partnership and with our key partners to ensure that children do remain within the families, their communities, and as I've said, that we have a number of services to support and facilitate them remaining within Kirklees. So it's just opening to any questions that you have in relation to the report that's presented and just some of the key highlights that I've raised today.
Thank you, Ophelia, for your presentation. That's great. Panel members, questions and comments. Dale, you got your hand up, and then followed by Jackie. Let's start with Dale.
Okay, I've got two questions. The first is, it's good to see that the upper age limit children is going babies that have been taken into care. It's now over 40. I would like to know how this compares to our statistical neighbours and nationally. I've previously asked a question about parental contact because I'm aware that this is quite complicated and quite expensive. So could we have some more information about the number of infants being under a year and how many of those go on to being in the 1 to 4 year age group? Obviously, what I'm concerned about is that no child has a life trajectory of permanently being in care, as we know that is an indication for an absolute disastrous future.
Ophelia, you might not be able to respond to all of that, but
no, as Elaine got a hand up, because I think there is some work that we're doing.
Oh, right.
Yeah, sorry,
yeah, Elaine. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Elaine McShane. I'm the Service Director, Family Support and Child Protection. So, yes, just in terms of that, a very important question, I think, because it is part of a national discussion, and there's been some very recent Nuffield research that's actually looked at children, what they describe of either born into care or where care proceedings have been taken very shortly after a child has been born, and some of the experiences of parents within that. So what we're actually doing is actually looking at a comparison of our children in Kirklees and the decision making around that. Just as a bit of a assurance at this point, with children under 1, actually our care proceedings process it's limited to 26 weeks. So all decision making around children are made within the court arena around a 26-week period, and that's closely monitored. What Ophelia talked about is our legal gateway is very heavily involved in the decision about where we're making decisions about children being removed. We have legal advice at that decision making point. Beyond that, if a child is taken into care before their first review, which is before their second review, they have a first review. The second review is at 4 months. A decision is indicative decision is made about their plan going forward, and that could be a return to parents, remaining with extended family, or actually being placed for adoption. So actually decisions for young children are made in a very timely framework. But actually I think what we'll have going forward, because we've got a working group looking at the national guidance, and actually we'll have a bigger picture, better picture of what Kirklees decision making looks like and where we fit within that broader agenda. So I think something to come back to a future meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Elaine. Okay, right, Jackie, you got a hand raised.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Ophelia. Just going back to the number of children looked after in care. Obviously, it looks as though we're about a third less than the neighbours, the statistical neighbours, and I know that you covered off some of that in your presentation around children, a lot of work taking place to keep children at home and within the local community with friends and etc. Is that work not happening then with the other local authorities that are considered to be statistical neighbours, or are we particularly different? I'm just trying to understand that issue.
I think a lot of it is based on, I think, a lot of the other local authorities, and I think it's around the financial support and the offer that we're actually providing to our connected, the family and friends. And within Kirklees, we have a placement support team or connected family support carers, and that's not if you look at some of the other statistical neighbours, they don't have that finite resource. And I think we've been able to work a very early planning in relation to that support to the families. So that's that's enabled us for children not to be placed with foster carers and care orders, but we've been able to secure them within their family on a special guardianship order. So a lot of our children, young people were initially looked after, but because of the early planning, the work that we've done, the early support, the early conversations that we've had with the parents and with their extended families, has enabled us to place children, and it's creating that permanence for children, young people to remain within the communities. And some of the other local authorities don't have that level of resource or that level of commitment and financial support to families. And I think that's created some of the differences and the disparity between the data. And also we're looking at the data as well. I think it'd be interesting for us to have a look at the current data, because I think the comparables are based on the 2020 data. We're in 2021, so I think it'd be useful for us to actually have a look at the data in relation to what's actually happening within our comparable neighbours now in sort of June 2021. So I'd be interested to look at that to see, is there any different? And I know within Kirklees, we've maintained the same level of input with our workers going out visiting families, whereas I know a lot of our statistical neighbours, they haven't had that same level of frequency of visiting, and I know there's been some challenges around the resources that remain being available, but whereas within Kirklees that commitment has been maintained and that level of support's maintained. I'm sure Elaine would want to come in as well.
Can you see? I suppose the thing we've done as well is a lot of work across West Yorkshire to try and look at the families that are moving into the different areas. So as part of One Adoption West Yorkshire, which we're obviously heavily involved in, we've done some work around special guardianship orders and having consistency across Leeds, Bradford, Wakefield, Calderdale and Kirklees, so that families get families get the same level of support. I think a lot of that is financially and practical support comes very differently in different areas, but as Ophelia said, we do have a support service for those families that do take special guardianships, and we're looking to enhance that further. I think if you looked at our statistics, you probably haven't got I think what's interesting to see is actually where the figure against reduction in children looked after against the number of special guardianship orders, because there has been an increase in that. So that's why we're moving resource to make sure that actually when families take that decision, because it's a big decision, they get the right type of support at the right time. So I think going forward, probably for your benefit, incorporate those figures into the document as well, so you can see where children are being placed.
Okay, Jackie. And just to put a bit of context on that, I mean, Kirklees has historically always had low numbers of children looked after. I mean, 15 years ago, I think the numbers were half what they are now. looking at 300, 350. There was investment, ironically, about early intervention and prevention, looking at stopping children coming into care, but the numbers did go up, and they rose in line with national trends, but they've still remained lower relatively to our statistical neighbours, and it has been a question we've been asking for a long time, and there are some creative things being done in Kirklees that are, again, across West Yorkshire. So, but it's a good question to ask, Jackie. Thank you for that. So, great. And we'll keep an eye on it, and we're looking at it. And again, it's gone. The trend is now down again. So it's gone down from about 700 18 months ago down to 650. So it's going down again. So it'd be interesting to look what's happening elsewhere with that. Dale, you got your hand. Is that another question you got?
Yes. Yeah. My second question.
Yeah, sorry.
Regarding placements outside of Kirklees, can you tell us what semi-independent living accommodation not subject to children's home regulations looks like?
Right, I think, Ophelia, you had your hand up before that, so have I missed you?
Yeah, no, I was just going to add just one more point, sorry, in relation to what's contributed to the reduction as well in the number of looked after children. We've had quite a number of children who have now reached the age of 18, so that means that they're no longer looked after, and they're now within the care leaving service. So again, although they're still having input from our service, they're not classified as being specifically looked after. So I just wanted to just add that final point. Thank you.
Yeah, so the children, leaving, no longer looked after. But then there mustn't be children coming in to the system to replace those numbers then. So hopefully that's to do with some of the stuff around special guardianship orders and other prevention stuff we've been talking about.
And just in terms of what the conversation that Elaine, just in terms of talking about that, it's about the timely and early planning. And it's the early resolution in terms of court, ensuring that our children, so they're not being made subject to care orders. They are the final order, or the final from court is a special guardianship order. So I think that's really positive. That's what's also contributed to the reduction.
Yeah. Thanks, Ophelia. Okay, Tom.
And my question.
Tom. I think Tom's coming in. Gail. Yeah, sorry.
I am. Tom Brailsford, Service Director for Resources Improvement and Partnerships. Thank you, Councillor Marchington. In terms of 16 plus semi-independent accommodation, that's it's unregulated provision. Excuse me. By Ofsted, and we place children and young people into that provision who don't have what we call care needs. So their needs aren't the same as other children and young people who we wouldn't place in unregulated provision. So we make a very clear distinction about that. But it's just to be clear that 16 plus semi-independent accommodation as it currently stands isn't regulated by Ofsted.
Dale, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, well, what does it look like? I mean, what is unregulated accommodation?
It's often a supportive environment. I mean, Elaine will probably come in, but it's usually a supportive environment where children and young people are starting to move towards independence and are getting some support around that. Elaine could probably explain a bit more in terms of what that looks like for a child or young person.
Yes, I can say that obviously we work with different providers that offer different opportunities for young people, and that's based on their support needs. So it could be a flat type provision where actually there's what they describe as floating support. So that's actually not someone with them all the time, but actually people that can step in and offer support and guidance. Or it could be something as bespoke as actually seeking a house and working with the young person to develop that for their home. So actually it comes in many guises, and it's a bespoke package to the individual support needs of that young person. It's not a one size fits all. In terms of oversight and decision making, that comes to Tom and myself. So young people are not actually placing that any of those provisions unless we're absolutely confident it's right to meet their support needs. Some of these young people as well may have come in as homeless. So it, you know, and that's where we step in to make sure they've got the right support. So it comes in many guises, many different types of provision, and we work closely with our providers to make sure that actually if things move into a situation where a young person needs more care, then actually we have to look at, is that the right setting, and place them elsewhere where they get some enhanced support.
Okay.
Thank you for that. I was concerned because of national reports recently, some televised, where this kind of accommodation was in fact endangering the child. But I'm pleased to hear that you do have continual oversight of those
Absolutely.
locations. Thank you very much, Elaine.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. Thanks, Tom. Jackie?
Thank you again. Can I just ask about the ethnicity changes in children that are looked after, and whether or not that actually reflects the child population of Kirklees? I'm just trying to understand if there's an area that we should be focusing on around any ethnicity.
Can we give some information? Is it possible to respond to that this afternoon, or is that something we're going to have to come? Ophelia?
I think that's a piece of work that would need to go away to do the detail and do the comparison and the breakdown over a period of time, and then to compare that to the different areas within Kirklees. So I think that's a piece of work that I can take away and then present the information back at the next scrutiny panel.
Yeah, that would be really useful. Thank you, Ophelia. Okay, thanks for that question, Jackie. Okay, panel members, have we got any more questions on the number of children looked after? Right, well, thank you, Ophelia, for your presentation, and thank you, Tom and Elaine, for your responses to the questions, and thank you, panel members, for your questions. Right, that's great. Okay, we're on to item 8 now. It's a verbal update and a presentation on the Youth Justice Plan. And I'm hoping I can see Ian Mottleshaw is ready to go. If you want to just introduce yourself, Ian, and then we'll go into your presentation.
I will do. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Ian Mottleshaw. I'm the Head of Service for the Youth Engagement and Contextual Safeguarding. And this afternoon, I want to just make reference to the Youth Justice Plan, which is dated 2021 to 2025. Currently, the plan is en route to lead members and full cabinet. So I do expect going forward, the plan through the performance and progress will form part of subsequent scrutiny panels. But today, what I would like to do is just set the scene and bring to scrutiny a sighting of our ambition and intention in taking the Youth Justice Service forward through that plan. So the purpose of the plan will provide an overview of the service, annual performance, highlighting the priorities, and that will look forward through the next 4 years. I mentioned their priorities, and I'll touch on those. There will be 6 priorities. They will be reducing the number of first-time entrants, reducing reoffending, reducing the use of custody, improving participation of children and families, and developing those approaches to desistance, tackling disproportionality, and reducing serious youth violence. How we'll do that through the plan is through approaching through both people, partners, and places. So when I refer to people, I think I'd like to sort of highlight to you that the Youth Justice Service is the recipient of the Restorative Service Quality Mark, and it's those principles that do embed the practices and form the basis of our approach. When I talk about partners, we would all recognise that achievements are greater through collaboration, and it's important to identify that the Youth Justice Service is a team of partners, both in its delivery and its strategic vision. And then when I refer to places, I think in the past, Scrutiny will have touched on the Youth Engagement Service, and it's important to understand that the Youth Engagement Service and the place-based work really dovetail around the plan and support the Youth Justice Service. So that would then look at creating and improving safe locations, promoting activities, and enabling voices within their communities. Of the 6 priorities I mentioned, one was disproportionality. It is a priority in its own right, but tackling inequalities is a theme that goes entirely through the plan and beyond that, and works in coordination with the wider council priorities and plans. And the last thing I'll sort of touch on is around the vision, taking that child first approach, seeking to work in partnership, that approach being with people, not to people, and throughout that, the values of trust, respect, empower, and repair. So I appreciate that that is a quick resume of what's on offer going forward, and I do look forward to bringing the plan to you, together with a very recent HMIP inspection, to share progress and aspirations for the future. So if that's okay, I'm happy to take questions.
Lovely, thank you, Ian. Linda, your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's a bit difficult to ask anything meaningful because obviously we didn't see anything before the meeting, and you've given us a very, very high level overview. What I'd like to understand is how your priorities for the next 4 years, for the 21 to 25 plan, are different from what you had in place before. So what's changed?
I think what's changed is probably not the priorities, it's the more long-term vision. Plans in the past have been annual plans. So there is always that ambition to reduce first-time entrants. There is always that ambition to go through all of those priorities. So there's not a shift in the priorities as such. There's a longer-term vision, if that makes sense.
So how is the longer-term vision then different from what the vision was before?
Well, it becomes less reactionary and more sustainable. So understanding that vision together with the partners and shared objections longer term just embeds the route and the journey that we want to move on. And it also dovetails with the Youth Engagement Service, how the Youth Engagement Service will be able to work around young people that are pre-criminal space or post-criminal space. So I think the plan in itself gives you a longer perspective and draws in more than just the reaction. But the principles and the ambitions do not change. It was no different, was the ambition last year around where we wanted to be. It's just that broader approach to gather the momentum and keep going forward with a longer term strategy.
I see. Could I ask one more? Or
Yeah, go on, Linda. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
it was just one specific one, if I may. One of your objectives you said was about tackling disproportionality. And when you touched on that very briefly, you referenced reducing inequality. So is disproportionality the same as inequality, or what is disproportionality?
Disproportionality is, in my mind, totally broad about the disadvantage, the inequalities, plus the ethnicity and the demographics of the community in terms of who are getting involved in criminal justice, who are receiving the services within criminal justice. In my mind, it's far broader than any one thing. It's about everybody, whether you're disadvantaged through whatever aspect.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Linda. Yeah, fine. Okay, Richard Smith, you got a hand raised.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to pick up on the last point. You sort of clarified it a little bit. I just want to be very careful when we talk about disadvantages and disproportionality, and then you mention ethnicity as a given in the same sentence. We just need to be very careful that we don't just oversee the fact that white working class boys are actually probably the most disadvantaged when you look at it across the socioeconomic spectrum in terms of educational achievements and a whole host of other things. So I'm all for looking at this in the round, and no objection to what you said, but we just need to keep in mind that it's not always about ethnicity, it's about many other factors as well. And I think you sort of clarified that a little bit in your later points, but that was the point I wanted to make.
Yeah, and if I could come back, I think that you probably captured it more articulate than me around tackling inequalities and referencing that. But point taken, and it's every aspect in my mind. About
yeah, no, I mean it wasn't particularly trying to pull you up on that at all. I just think there's a tendency to overlook, sort of how things are. How could I put it? You've got to look at the statistics and not focus on which group that those people are in. Yeah, I think we're on the same page anyway. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, fine. Okay, any other? Tom Brailsford.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. Just coming in on that point, really, I think, obviously we know there are a number of groups that are overrepresented in the criminal justice system, children and young people with learning disabilities, children and young people with mental health. We also know that our children and young people often have speech and language therapy needs, which are overrepresented in provision. So I think, it's just to come in on that point and say we know there's a number of inequalities that we're trying to address through that, really, to make sure that the criminal justice system isn't overrepresented with some of these groups, and look at what we can do to reduce that overrepresentation, really.
It's a question of asking why, isn't it? Is that hand still up, Richard?
I just put it back up again. I was going to ask you another question, actually. Something else has just come to my mind. I don't know what this is the forum for it, but I'll try it and see whether I get told it's probably best to ask it somewhere else. But I was made aware of an Ofsted report of a school in Dewsbury last week that was a little bit concerning. And I know we're not talking about criminal justice here, but we're talking about the vulnerability of children being exposed to inappropriate literature. And the Ofsted report was fairly damning. And I suspect that this school is actually an independent school without the Kirklees remit in sense of it's a private school. So, given this is children's scrutiny, I just wanted to say at some point I think we need to be having a discussion about this type of thing.
So you can bring it up under the work programme, Richard, but we need to be specific about the information you're talking about, because again, it's a public meeting, isn't it? So.
Absolutely, and I don't see anything wrong with discussing it in public. I think it's publicly available. It's been on all the national press and everything. But we need to be open and honest about these things. If there's an issue with something like that, I think we need to address it in public.
Right. Okay. Right. Just to go back to the groups, to follow up what Tom's talking about disproportionality. I mean, what we do need to remember, particularly regarding children and young people, is actually the number of children and young people who are involved with the criminal justice system. It's a very small proportion of the whole. less than 1%. Far fewer children and young people involved with the criminal justice system than adults. We need to remember, and when we're looking at disproportionality, it's within that very small number. And there are questions we need to ask. If there are more children, young people from a particular group or with a particular background or a particular experience who are ended up involved with the criminal justice system, why is that happening? And is there anything we do to help? Because by understanding that, I think we would all hope that as few children and young people as possible are involved with the criminal justice system, and if we've got a good handle on that, we can help with that in the future. Okay, right. Any other questions then for Ian? Right, thank you, Ian. That's great.
Thank you.
Okay,
thank you.
Thanks for all that work. Give our best wishes to the youth offending team. That was one of the visits that we did 18 months, 2 years ago now. I think we'd quite like to come and have another visit sometime, Ian, if that's appropriate. So
absolutely, more than welcome.
Great. Okay.
More than welcome.
Lovely. Thank you. Okay. Right. Item 8. We've done Youth Justice Plan. Item 9, Children's Work Programme and Agenda. So thank you to those people, for members of the panel who contributed to developing the work programme. We've got it highlighted there. I had a meeting with Viv Kendrick and Carol Patterson, who were here the other day. Here today, looking at cabinet priorities. I think we highlighted a number of those. Viv was talking about looking at the development of family hubs and the improvements therein, and I think that was one of the things we picked up, and the way we'd want to scrutinise that was looking at families and children's engagement with those particular hubs. I think that links in with Dale's clarification on the minutes. We also said a number of councillors across the council actually involved with the children's hubs, and it'd be good to get feedback from them. There was a bit Viv highlighted on multi-systemic therapies. It's interesting when we're talking about placements for looked after children. There's a children's home opening or about to open, and there was a link there with multi-systemic therapies. And I know, Dale, you raised that there's a significant investment in multi-systemic therapies, and I think we want to be looking at somewhere on the work programme to get some information back about that. The new stay put policy and the learning care packages that went through cabinet yesterday. And Carol highlighted, again, we've had the presentation in the informal meeting about the Kirklees Futures, a strategic approach to learning. Carol was highlighting looking at the SEND improvement plan. I think we've asked to revisit that. There's quite a bit of scrutiny work done on that a couple of years ago, 18 months ago, and we want to speak to some of the families who were involved with that and just to see what their experience is of the new the SEND programme. And I think I briefly highlighted about, actually be interesting to know about our relationship with academies and multi-academy trusts and how we can influence the work that they do to improve educational outcomes with our children and young people. Richard, in your hand, particularly concerns are, and we'll fit that.
It's to do with safeguarding of young people, isn't it? That's the issue. And if they're exposed
really useful to have the information in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send you the information by email.
And then we'll and again, if you can do that next couple of days, I've got a meeting with officers Monday, and we can see about that. Okay, right. I don't know. Did the Kirklees Futures meeting? Did any of the panel members manage to get there on the 29th of June? No, fine. I think I went to the aspiration board relatively recently, and that again, it was really positive. Again, engagement from school leaders and from officers in that respect, and I think there was a really positive. The peer review. So some of our peers and partners have been having a really close look at our practices, and they've done some dipping into casework. And what the phrase that really stood out for me is that they'd looked at all the information and they found no children at risk. I think that's a word we might want to qualify that it's that I suppose children are at risk also, but in safeguarding terms and children's services terms, that was a real positive outcome. And compared to where were 3 or 4 years ago when we were looking at issues with them, that's a really positive outcome. So, panel members, any other questions or comments on the work programme? Dale?
Yes. Do you all remember receiving responses to the previous meeting? I'm thinking about the hubs, right?
Yeah.
What I would like to know is when things like this are planned, whoever is doing the planning, do they have a model or models of the intended users which are used to framework accessibility? I mean, innovation is good and necessary, but our experience of looking into the narratives given to us by the PCAN parents on children with special education needs, we discovered that access was a critical factor. And I would just like to understand more about how these initiatives are actually framed. I mean, how many times are, let's say, who's going to be our most frequent user of this service? What conditions do they live in? What are their work and school commitments? I'm just very, very concerned about the level of access that is going to be available.
Right, so we've got that. We've got engagement of family hubs on the work plan. I've made a note of those questions. So I don't know if Helen has as well. So I've got down, how are these initiatives framed?
Yes.
Who are the most frequent users?
Yes.
What are their school commitments? And
Yes.
which might affect access. Right.
Exactly.
Have you made a note of those questions, Helen? Helen?
Yes, Chair. Sorry, I was just taking myself off mute.
Yeah,
yes.
fine.
So I've got how are the initiatives framed? Who are the users? And sorry, what was the third one?
What are their school commitments, which might affect their access?
Yes.
Fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll get that included. We'll get that put on the in that particular part of the programme. Thanks, Dale. Joanne?
Thanks, Councillor Marchington. It's Joanne Sanders, Service Director for
Yeah.
Learning and Early Support. Thanks for those questions, Dale. Absolutely, we're preparing for some of the implementation following Cabinet decision making. So I'll make sure as well that we're giving you a really comprehensive update about the engagement. We've been working really closely with PCAN and other parent groups to make sure that actually these are serving the needs of local communities, and there's some work ongoing over the summer as well. So thank you so much actually for the questions, because I think we'll be really looking forward to updating Scrutiny about that. They're really good challenges to put back. Thank you.
We'll do that. Thanks, Joanne. Okay. Right. Thank you very much, everybody. Yeah, that's your just looking at them. Thank you for your attendance this afternoon, for your contributions and your questions. Our next meeting is on the 15th of September, and the meeting in public is at 2:15 with an informal meeting prior to that. So look forward to seeing people then on the 15th. So thank you.